Which role did Africa's famous tertiary institutions play towards grooming political leaders? What can be made of the University of Fort Hare's 100 years of existence? What made most universities of yesteryear centers of political activism and militancy? And why has government established a commission of inquiry into the feasibility of a free higher education? What time is it? It's question time. Welcome to the show. My name is Limpopo. The continent's universities and colleges are lauded for not only being centers of academic excellence, but for having also made a significant contribution towards grooming future political leaders. From Makerere University, University of Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, to the erstwhile Turfloop University here in South Africa's Limpopo province, the list is endless. Last week, Fort Hare University celebrated their 100th anniversary of its founding in 1916. Among the illustrious alumni of this institution is former South African State President Nelson Mandela, Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe, President of Botswana Sir Seretse Khama, to mention just a few. As part of celebrating Africa Month, we dedicate today's show to some of Africa's famous tertiary institutions. And we are live, by the way. If you can call us and air your views. The numbers to dial is 089-110-4210, our Twitter handle at QuestionTime24. My guest, Professor Bani Pichana. He's a former student at Fort Hare University. Andile Chona is the spokesperson for the Commission of Inquiry into Higher Education and Training. And from our Polokwane studio is Professor Mahlo Mkhalong. He's the Vice Chancellor at the University of Limpopo, otherwise famously known as Turfloop. Let me welcome you all to Question Time. Pichana, let me start with you. As Fort Hare celebrated 100 years last week, how did you feel?
Well, it was great. It's a milestone. I was at Fort Hare 50 years ago, so it kind of made me feel like it's a halfway mark I've covered already. But the environment and the atmosphere was great. It was good to reconnect with the institution. But at the same time, we were not unmindful of the conflict that there was among dissatisfied students at the university, and the fact that there had been burning in buildings and all sorts of things.
Okay.
But it was an exciting moment. It kind of felt like the whole of South Africa really was there alongside celebrating a great event.
When you went to Fort Hare, did you go there by choice or was it lack of option?
I think I went there by choice.
Okay.
Because the only other option I had, which I did try, I went to work in a factory before when I finished matric, and I had this romantic idea that I wanted to be a worker. But within a year, I realized that that was not my calling. And so I then decided to go to university.
Okay.
So, you know, for me, Fort Hare was by choice also because it had so many memories, so many mentors, so many people that I knew who had been to Fort Hare, people who really, for me, were trailblazers.
Was it there where your SASO graduation happened?
Yes, it was at Fort Hare, really, to step back a little bit, in 1968. That's when the students at the university decided to have a mission that then put out a petition to the university administration, the result of which we were all expelled. Or no, not all of us. In fact, the university was closed down, but 17 of us were eventually expelled. And it was out of that year in December there was a bringing together of students from all the campuses of the black universities as they were at that time. So I think it is true to say that Fort Hare was really the stepping stone towards the establishment of black consciousness.
Professor Mkhalong, let me bring you in here. You are the head of today what is known as University of Limpopo, otherwise Turfloop or University of the North to some of us. Indeed, when some of us decided to enroll at Turfloop, there was a political argument behind it. You know, I had an option to go to Rhodes, but I thought Turf was a better option.
Yes, good afternoon, Paul, and good afternoon to our listeners. Good afternoon, Bani. Yes, it's true, Paul. During those days, though, maybe just a slight addition, most black students had limited choices. You know, much as you would have loved to study at Rhodes, you could have loved to study at Wits during our days. You had to obtain what used to be called ministerial approval. The minister, or I think it was Bantu Administration or Bantu Education, who then had to approve that you could go and study there. But then that created something which they did not expect. You know, when these black universities, especially when Turfloop, Ungoya, and those ones were then established, they were established with a certain frame of mind. They were supposed to form beautiful monuments, you know, excellent monuments of apartheid, of separate development.
Yes.
They were established with the sole purpose of coming up or training and developing administrators who could go and serve Bantu administrations, later the homelands. And later, as time went on, like where we are today, these universities really came out to be centers of excellence, much against the ideology or the frame of mind which those who established them had in mind.
And Prof, today when you look back at the role that your university has played, how do you contextualize this? You know, during the day when we were preparing for the program, I was saying Turfloop became, I guess, one of those examples of how international the struggle for liberation in South Africa was, because that is where, you know, your SASO Viva Frelimo rallies were also held and became problematic, you know, ending up or rather getting some of the SASO leaders detained, you know, sent to Robben Island and all that.
Yeah, I think Banu would support me here that I think SASO was then launched at the University of the North at Turfloop. And SASO was based on black consciousness. And if it really worked miracles and worked wonders in some of us who were still young then, and, you know, having to be groomed and brought up in the ideology of black consciousness, it took us somewhere. You know, personally, the way I look at these periods, firstly, let me congratulate Fort Hare for having celebrated or having attained 100 years of existence, sorry. Now, if you look at the leadership cause, you can say Fort Hare was really instrumental in training those leaders, the Mugabes of this world, the Mandelas of this world. They all came out of Fort Hare during that period. Now, the second period which one can claim, I know most people will not agree with us, is that the University of the North, then Turfloop, was then responsible for the production of a second generation of leaders, it participated. Not that these other universities didn't, but it did participate in that. If you look at the political sphere, if you look at the judiciary, I mean, look at those that came from Turfloop, the judge presidents that went past, starting from Judge President Ngwepe, Judge President Liu, the deputy judge presidents, and most of the advocates and senior counsels which are there, they were trained at Turfloop. That's why I say Turfloop then came in to participate during what I call the second phase.
Okay.
And it's during that phase that black consciousness really got rooted and the struggle against apartheid really intensified.
Dr. Pichana, you didn't, as Mkhupuzatiro said at his graduation, that what use is one's education if it is not going to help improve the lives of his community. You weren't just students at varsity. You had roles and responsibilities in the broader society at the time, I guess, surrounding communities at Fort Hare as well.
I just want to underline what Matlo was saying, that it was actually very, very key. Black consciousness was key because out of the sort of rebellious spirit of that time, there came to be a kind of political focus, which hadn't been there before, because the idea of how do you actually deal with Bantustanization of the university? Now at Fort Hare it was important because Fort Hare had known a different sort of era. It wasn't founded by the Separate Universities Act, but it was suffering for the same reason as other universities. So what really did come about was this idea of linking the black universities together and finding a way of organizing together. And in spite of that environment, in spite of that system, the intellectual environment at the university was vibrant, was very, very strong indeed. And indeed resistance to the system was also very firm and very strong. As far as Fort Hare was concerned, it had the advantage of history and of tradition and of background. It had a reference point. It had people who in 1959 had vowed to close down the university. It had the African National Congress, it had the National Union of South African Students, which had been banned and were not allowed on campus. But at the same time, the students at Fort Hare decided intentionally not to collaborate under any shape or form with the university. So the leadership core out of Fort Hare was founded out of less formal means than the SRC president and whatever was. Out of the recognition of inherent gifts that people had in the meetings that we held. So we never had a formal leadership structure. We never had an SRC those days because we boycotted all of those things. We never would participate in graduation ceremonies, and we didn't want to be seen to be collaborating with the university administration under any shape or form except to participate in the educational task and educational project. So for that reason, I think Matla is quite right. Notwithstanding everything, universities like Turfloop have produced outstanding leaders. Mkhupuzatiro, in part of his own boycott of the university, was asked to make a speech on behalf of the graduates and used that occasion to state very, very clearly what the students were saying about their condition at that point. And their condition wasn't just the university itself. Their condition was the condition of the black person in South Africa in general. Okay. And therefore, the destiny of the black student wasn't one of privilege. The destiny of an African graduate was to go to the trenches together with the communities where they come from to try to build a new society and never to be sucked in by band education and separate development.
It would appear that indeed some of those challenges which these young students at the time were grappling with are still there. Funding.
Yes, the issue of funding is quite a challenge at the moment. You remember that in the previous years, there were student protests in various universities. But last year, the protests intensified, and that led to President Jacob Zuma meeting with the vice chancellors of universities, where after their meeting, as well as student representatives, then after that meeting, it was decided that in the year 2016, there won't be any increase in fees in universities. That led to President Zuma announcing early this year that there will be a commission of inquiry that will look into the feasibility of fee-free higher education and training in the country. That's where we are at the moment. We are looking into the funding, where the funding were to come from if we were to have a fee-free education in higher education.
Okay, Professor Mkhalong, what is the difference between that student body, if I may use the word, the student body in the 70s and perhaps 80s, and the ones that you are currently presiding over?
Well, I think they are separated by periods in the history, periods in the development of South Africa. The students in the 70s, we firstly had to fight for identity and unity. That is where black consciousness was very instrumental. I always tell my students these days that you guys, when we were students, when I started at Turfloop, we had one student organization, SASO. And for some reason, without being forced, we all belonged to SASO because it preached that gospel which we want to hear, black consciousness. And that is what assisted us. Now, the students of today, granted they have got various political affiliations and that, but their struggles as students are sort of the same. Like you are talking about fees.
Yes.
That the students of today, what they would prefer to see is a free, quality, higher education. Those are the things which they are fighting for, and I think understandably so. The period we are in now should, assist them in fighting for that.
Prof, a better era?
It is a much better era than what it was that time. There can't be any doubt about that. So the context, I always say to the radicals of today, that let's take context seriously. That in the pre-1994 era, students were having to pay fees, usually under some sort of state loan system supporting them. But the universities were not ours. Universities were not ours. So universities were places where we really did believe, in many respects, in terms of what we were taught, the syllabus and all of that, that we were places of indoctrination. The power of the administration was all about indoctrination. The presence of security police on campus, who were teaming around campus, taking people one by one, meant that we were in a situation where we were constantly under watch. Today, I'd like to believe the situation is different. I believe that we have our own government, we've got our own constitution, we've got the right to vote and vote people if you so wish. So there are issues that we must make no mistake, are fundamentally different. Now universities are really taking seriously students and students' concerns around curriculum, transformation, etc. They try to take them seriously. But clearly, as far as students are concerned, they're not going far enough. There are matters that vice chancellors are beyond their control. The huge problem of poverty in our country, the huge problem of inequality, that is a very real problem. The fact that students come to university and have no food to eat and have nowhere to live, nowhere to stay is a problem that is way beyond universities to resolve, to be honest. And yet, the opportunities for higher education today are much more than they had ever been before. Our participation rate today is 19.2% of 19 to 24-year-olds are at universities these days. Now those days, at Fort Hare in 1968, when I was there were 551 students. That was complete. That was the whole university, 551. There were lots of other courses that were not available at that university, for which you must get the ministerial permission to go to WITS and other places like that. Okay. So yes, things are different, but there are problems with our system that needs to be addressed, and I think our students are doing that.
Free education, is it feasible?
Well, that will be determined as soon as the commission concludes its work, and that will be dependent on the number of factors. Where we are at the moment, our evidence leaders, they are compiling a list of education experts and economists that will be presenting before the commission to advise how they see education model going forward. And if then they say, or whoever will come to us and say free education is feasible, then they'll have to advise where the funding will come from. Would government afford to fund education in the country alone? What is the role of the society? What is the role of the private sector? So all those factors will be put together, and then the commission then will conclude its work and present to the president.
Professor Mkhalong, are you still a University of the Poor Black Child?
We're going to remain that way for quite some time, and that's a conscious decision which we took as a university, that we're going to allow those who otherwise would never have had an opportunity to enter higher education to do so. Hence, the majority of our students, they rely on NSFAS. Hence, they become so heavily dependent on NSFAS to a point where NSFAS cannot fund them fully.
But
when they complete, they still owe in the university over and above owing NSFAS.
But you're not providing a poor education, I suppose.
Far from it.
Definitely not. We're providing quality education. That's why I always tell to my colleagues that we have no reason to feel inferior. Most of our programs, especially our professional programs, are accredited by the professional bodies.
Okay.
We are the first university after the advent of our democracy to open the School of Medicine, and that is no mean feat. You know, to open that school, you get grilled by the professionals and the professional bodies so that they make sure you will provide quality.
Okay. Professor Jan, in 20 seconds, what would be your message to the current crop of students and student leaders at Fort Hare, for instance?
First, for me, the sadness is that we still have an education system for the poor and an education system for the rich. I think that has no place in South Africa in our day and age. I think this commission ought to be concerned to really bridge that divide between rich and poor institutions and students, etc. I would say to the students at Fort Hare that they do need maximum support of the community as a whole in order for us together to drive towards quality higher education. I don't believe that they can do that on their own.
Okay. There you heard it from the old guard. They've seen it all. But that was question time for today. A big thank you to my guests and to you for watching the show. From me and the crew, you have yourself a wonderful time. Goodbye.